Voyage of the BSM Pandora. This is, I don't remember which Aries, 4, 5, 6, somewhere in there. One of the earlier ones. Well, they didn't last all that long as a whole. And we gotta readjust. So, this is a game that was really impressive in terms of what was attempted with it. And how little, a normal magazine issue of rules, etc. I don't know, what is it, 16 pages of rules? Yeah, 16 pages devoted to the game. Now, I think some of the Aries games had smaller rule sets than that, but that's about the normal S&T set. That's what was devoted to it. Tiny paragraph set, but it invented a whole mechanism. This is Butterfield's design, I think. That for a little while was very interesting. Showed up in a few games. It showed up in Tales of the Arabian Nights. It showed up in Ambush and its antecedents. Of course, it showed up in Return of the Stainless Steel Rat. This isn't going to work well. And it was a really intriguing idea. And when you first got this one, when I first got this one, it was like, oh, wow, this is so cool. Out of all of them, this is the one that to me had the coolest premise behind it. Unfortunately, by being first and by being limited to the magazine size, it's got some real flaws to it. For one thing, there's just the size of it. Now, because of the luck factor, it would take you forever to run through all permutations or all major permutations, even to hit every possible planet and environ type thing. It would take you many, many, many plays. But that doesn't really say, gee, this is so replayable. Because the truth of the matter is, you're running into the same events again and again and again. You're running into the same paragraph of this tiny little 36 entry exploration matrix that has maybe 3 to 4 options based on the planet you're on. There is a significant limit to how many times you can play this because of that. And it depends on the person. I got a decent number of plays out of it. I'd say over the years, maybe a dozen. At first, 3 or 4 probably right away, and then I had to put it aside. And then every few years, like I like to do with any game, I pulled it out and played again. It fits my style okay for that. What doesn't fit my style is the mechanical expenditure on this game. And that has... So in a sense, that's not really a big critique of it right now, because there's a print and play version, as far as I know, up on Board Game Geek. I haven't looked at it. I haven't seen if it's any substantially different. But between that or photocopying the rules, charts and such not, you could put this together in a manner that's more accessible and more playable than what I dealt with. But I find the mechanics of flipping for the paragraph and then flipping back to the rules to look up what the critter's values really mean and what the character values order is and all this. There's just, there's no play aids with this sucker, right? It came in a very minimal set of components. So, if you had the ability to get rid of some of the mechanical harassment that the system puts on you. I mean, it is really an annoyance too much of the time. But then again, so is just rolling and looking up these charts again and again and again. Seeing the same results again and again and again from the small chart set. That adds to the annoyance factor too. So, no matter what, there was going to be kind of all right, this is not the best implementation that could be done on this. Some of the later paragraph systems I remember having a lot of fun with this, but so it's kind of unfair because I say, I remember having a lot of fun with Ambush too. I don't know whether or not that gets any better, and I'll play out I'll be covering that at some point. Another that I'll be covering at some point is Tales. That one I know works much better. But that one works much better because it's not a solo game. So one of my biggest gripes about this is I don't like solo games. And this one, while it starts to spin out an interesting story, doesn't spin out the kind of rich story that Ambush does. Ambush has this really scripted scenarios where that decreases the playability, but it provides a much richer story for what you get. And now with all kinds of expansions and everything to it, there's actually a fairly big set of different playthroughs you can get out of your rule set, even if they're going to cost you an arm and a leg to pick everything up. But Tales has the big advantage, like some other games that are kind of, something like Source of the Nile. It doesn't use the paragraph system, but it's got cards with what work out to be very similar to the paragraph system in terms of effect. So this is not as groundbreaking as maybe sometimes I try to portray it, because there were already games out there that gave you a great deal of variation of information in the same sort of fashion, where you're kind of creating a story out of these different parts. But this does seem like a jump, and some games directly were developed on this principle in a way that I don't feel like anything much. I'm trying to think if anything really came out of that Source of the Nile design beyond it. It's definitely innovative too, but no one kind of followed up on it that I'm aware of. There was an expansion for it. So both Source and Tales have this kind of advantage that you can be sitting around the table with a bunch of people. Now, Source is still kind of boring because there's a dryness to it. Every now and then there's something funny, like, natives kill off the character and eat all your bearers or whatever, and you're left struggling home, starving with no water in the desert or whatever. That can be amusing in a group of people. But you can die in Source, and in Tales you can't. So it's even more funny when bad things happen to you, like when you're crippled and a beggar and you can't do anything. There's just some really amusing aspects to Tales that it works probably the best of the paragraph systems. Anyway, this one, it definitely gets some rating increase by being this innovation. The theme, the idea of exploring new planets, and primarily the capturing of animals, that's exciting too. But when it comes to the actual play out and how it all actually works out, I don't think this is something that you're going to play again and again and again. I know it's not for me. Of course, nothing is for me, but I can see this total barrier where even when I had it early on, I couldn't play it very much. Even though I was excited about the idea of it. Tales has gotten a lot of play over the years, actually, by me. Just because of the richness of the stories it generates, even though they're not really connected in a detailed way. Anyway, given that this is a print and play, and you don't have to hunt down some rare version, I'd say if you have any willingness to build your own game, it's really not that hard. You need the rule book, you need the map. Do you need a color copy of the map? It would help, but you might be able to get away with a black and white version of it. As to counters, well, you don't really need them. That's what's really cool about this. The tools, you could write them all down on paper. Your characters, you could write down on paper. You could basically just take a counter scan and keep track of all the information on paper that way. You do need, to have some kind of marker on the space display to show where your ship is. But like using the blanks for explored markers, you could use a pawn or something like that. You do need to be able to reference the values on the counters, but you don't really necessarily need them on the board. They're not like they're deployed in a tactical formation or anything. The final thing I wanted to talk about is there is a little bit of record keeping in this sucker. Your tools and your character stats, that really you very seldom do. But keeping track of what stats you have on the animals is kind of important, and knowing those stats is important. And well, no, you'll never meet those same animals again. Once you meet them, you're never affected. Once you have captured one, you will never be affected by it. But you do have to keep the stats on ones you haven't captured, because those you can meet again and get another opportunity to capture. Anyway, it's an interesting diversion and probably worth whatever little cost there is to printing it out. You know, I mean, a couple of bucks, really. As kind of a fun little solitaire, couple of times playing. But I don't think that it's something that's going to have a great deal of replay for anyone, really. I could see, though, because it is kind of a difficult game to win, trying again and again to win, if that's kind of your goal there. I've won some of the times, though, so I'm not sure that's that big a deal. Now, I want to look something up. The exploration matrix, my remembrance was that you can only explore a hex once. Yeah, a hex containing an explored marker may not be explored again. A liquid hex or a hex containing a cave can be explored again. If an alien city is explored, there it is, and no intelligent life or artifact is found, it can be explored a second time. I gotcha. So that's the rule I missed with the couple alien city hexes that I discovered, was that you are actually able to second time hit them. But that's just a single small roll. And that could have made the difference, because there is a bonus on the chart. Had I been paying more attention, I would have noticed them. Anyway, that's more or less what little I have to say about Voyage. It's not really a game, you know, you come down to this optimism. Yeah. What little I have to say, and now I'll go on for, what, another 10 minutes? You get to optimize. What's kind of cool here is, and I just missed this because I'm not in the, I gotta get this out. You get to optimize what you're going to land on any given planet for. But if you're like me, you start coming to some understanding about what works. Now, I may be wrong about what works in terms of the missions that I'm creating. But, you know, you want one guy in the shuttle, you maybe want crew members on planets where they don't need environment equipment because they're kind of cheaper than robots are. On the other hand, where you're dealing with the weird environments where you have to port around equipment for the characters to, you know, survive in, more robots may make more sense. The rover, almost always, I start with it because I think it's really cool, and then I realize, you know, after a couple of planets, wow, this thing is really killing me. I can't haul this down. It's not worth it. There's a lot of luck in it. There's no question. Like, you know, where I lost a character through an instant event, essentially, that can happen. Likewise, if you're going to take the risk of leaving the shuttle unoccupied, you could lose the game off that because you only have one shuttle, and that's it. That's the end of your exploration. And that's how my game should have ended, but I didn't want to replay. I didn't want to leave it cut off without more of the game. There's a lot of repetition, though, in what you find. Not that there's not more depth or richness in the paragraphs you could find, it's just you don't tend to. And you don't really want to go through it, if you're like me at least, more and more times just to get everything. I could see some people maybe being obsessed with that. If you are, you're probably going to make yourself miserable doing it. Alright, let's cut that before we get to that 10 minutes. Next up, back to the hell of flying colors. We're going to give it one more shot with everything written down. And in part, that was why I did this, was because I wanted to get kind of in the mood of keeping more records